Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Kin's Kathy's Corner. Today, we are welcomed by Kathy Stone, the cornerstone to Project Kin. Project Kin is a community of family historians hooked on stories. We're here because our family stories are the core to all of the deep genealogical work we do. It's the stories that carry these messages down to our family, to our descendants. So I'm excited to bring Kathy into our conversation today because she, as she does every month, and you can see all of her archives at projectkin.org/Kathy's-corner. Today we're going to pick up on a series of programs we have focused around the military remembrances at this special time of year. This year, of course, we're celebrating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II with VE Day in June, and then the end of the war with the conclusion of the war in the Pacific in September. So today, Kathy has a special program focused on the artifacts, the military artifacts in our family collections. And then Monday, of course, here in the United States, we'll be celebrating our Memorial Day. And then a week later, on Thursday, June 5th, I'm delighted to welcome Jennifer Holick, who will be joining us to talk really about war stories and healing. And this is a core focus of much of her work. Many of you will be familiar with her work here on Substack. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Stone. Go ahead, please, Kathy.
Thanks, Barbara. And good to see everyone here today and those watching afterwards. And of course, I start to lose my voice right on time at 4 o'clock. It's allergy season, I'm sure, many places in the world right now. So as Barbara said, we're going to look at exploring our mystery artifacts. And I will just share my screen. There we go. So we're going to talk about exploring mystery artifacts today. And I wanted to say that a couple things up first. I'm not a genealogist. If we go back to when Barbara's little bit on me on Kathy's Corner, the description says, I'm a retired professional photo manager who's working on her collection now. And so in my collection, I have a lot of military stuff because I had ancestors who were in the military. And so that's my connection with it. I'm also not an expert by any stretch in military history. And so I just thought I'd make those clear. I'm not coming to you as an expert today on military artifacts or military history. I'm approaching this as we do always in Kathy's Corner, what is in our collections as when we're trying to tell our family history that we want stories that we want to tell and show. So these are just a few of the things that, excuse me, that are in my family collection. There's some medals. There's a ship in a bottle. If you tuned into our live Project Kin Live on Sunday as I was driving back from my hometown, you would have heard I talked a little bit about my ship in the bottle. And there's some other artifacts there that I'm going to tell a little bit of the stories behind them and focus on how do we preserve our archives and things. So essentially, I want to look at what's the artifact? What is it that we're talking about? What stories were you told about it? And can we verify the stories? Because again, as we know, sometimes stories get told over and over and over and elaborated in the telling. So are there ways to verify what the stories are? And then are there stories within the story? And I added two other points, which I didn't go back and fix this slide. I also want to talk, what are we going to do with these artifacts? Just a little bit on that. And also any other stories that anyone else would like to share that we have time to at the end about what artifacts are in your collection. There we go. So here is under what is the artifact? And so we're going to look at this one. So what this is it's a bronze plaque. My great uncle, Daniel Loudon, his name is inscribed on it. And so one of the first things to do is describe the object. So that's what I'm doing here. The inscription that's hard to read there says, he died for freedom and honor. It's about 4 inches, 5 inches in diameter and appears to be made out of bronze. So we're talking about the size. We should have a photo of the back, which I don't because this one isn't actually in my possession. It's in a cousin's possession. So photographs, if you can get them on both sides, because often there's things on, or if it's more three-dimensional, this is like flat plaque. Other sides, if there's things on it, and the provenance of the item. Where did it come from? And so I have the, it's in the position of MS as my cousin. That's who has this particular artifact, but that's essentially the first step. What is it? This is the description of it. And then what stories were we told about this item? So this item, Daniel Loudon is my great uncle, as I said, and the story always told to us as a family member was that my grandmother had this in her possession, and we don't really know. I don't know how she ended up with it. She was the second youngest in the family, and a girl. So it's kind of odd that she ended up with it because the youngest one was another sister, and then there was Daniel was the next after them. So it was possible it was given to her because she was closest in age to Daniel. Would be one, but we don't know. We don't know that story, and we never got that story. So we were told that my great grandmother, yeah, would have been my great grandmother, received this plaque when Daniel was killed in World War One, and that the families of soldiers who were killed in the First World War received these plaques. So that's what we were told and kind of what we know. So that's the next point. Write down what the stories you were told. What are the recollections? Because that's part of the whole story about the object. What was told, and I don't know if Barbara recognizes where that screenshot is snipped from, but it's my you did. It's my snip from the story that was on Daniel in Ponga. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to grab that picture today. So there it is. So how can we verify the story? So I started looking to see what I could find, and this one was very easy to verify. I found a lot of information on Wikipedia of all places describing this memorial plaque, and there's a picture there, and the Wikipedia article is really good. It tells a lot about the history of it, where it came from, um, the battles that were killed, where they made the plaque for it was basically all of the First World War. It's British because he was in the British military. It also had a nickname, which I'd never heard before. Was to elaborate the story, it was referred to also as the dead man's penny or the widow's penny. So because of the shape of it, if those of you we don't have any of our UK people here today, if you're familiar with the really old pennies, they weren't quite that big. They weren't 4 inches big, but it looked like looked a bit, because of the bronze, looked like an old penny in England. So they referred to it as the dead man's penny when people collected it. They issued a million three, I'm reading out of the Wikipedia, which is really tiny, 1,355,000 of them were issued, using a total of 450 tons of bronze. And they were issued into the 1930s to commemorate people who died as a consequence of the war. So anything prior to World War, prior to World War II, up until that time. So it talks I found more information by using, so this I Googled and got the Wikipedia article right away, which was nice because so I verified it. That's exactly the picture of it. So we know what it is now. I verified that. But how else can we verify stories? We can use Google. I've sort of shifted off my Google and I'm using ChatGPT a lot more because I seem to get more in-depth answers and more focused answers than I do on Google. And so I found I put an inquiry into ChatGPT about what was a dead man's penny, and got all kinds of information about it. And then as I went through ChatGPT, it asked me if I wanted more information about the battles. So I put his name in and where he was buried because we knew that, and got a whole bunch of information on the battle. My Daniel was killed at Gallipoli in one of the earlier battles, and he was killed on the 15th of August, 1915, so early on in the war. And it gave me all sorts of information where I can look up information on the battles. And he's buried actually in Turkey and at the Helles Memorial of the battle, from the battles, the people who were killed in the battles around Gallipoli. So for that particular item, we've got it verified. Other sources, military history sites. Barbara's going to throw some in the in the resources to this article. There's really a lot. I also asked ChatGPT to give me a list of military resources for Canada and the UK and the US, and got pages of them. So I thought, well, you can easily ask ChatGPT that question and narrow down where you want to look, as opposed to us sharing pages of references. So there's a lot of places. Some you have to pay for. I'm also looking for Daniel's brother was also in the war, Benjamin. Benjamin was a POW taken prisoner by the Germans, and I'm trying to find out more information about him because we don't have very much. So I did find something at Find My Past, which you have to pay for. My Heritage had links to sites where I could look up more information, ancestry.com, military history sites, and then the government sites. So there's lots of different sources for things. There's also military history publications on Substack. So I plopped in military history, Canada, or actually I was looking for stuff on Daniel. I plumped in military history for UK and got some sites. And I think Barbara's going to pop those in the chat, or we may take a quick look at a couple of them after as well before that if we have time. And I asked also then for Canadian sites because my grandfather also fought in World War I, as did my great uncle, and he was in the British Navy in World War I, but he fought in the Canadian Army in World War II. He actually was a guard in World War II, but he was enlisted in the Canadian Army as well. So I wanted to know information for one of my other artifacts that we can talk about in a minute. So how can we verify the story? And then I'm going to add all this information to that somewhere, to wherever I decide to keep all the information, the site that I'm keeping all the information on, I will add all these details. I have a cousin who's the family genealogist, and some of the information I found is not on his in his about section, so I'll add a bit more of the about information to that. I'll put a picture of the plaque up on his family search record and add to that, but just so that the information we gather, that we keep it, that we preserve it somehow, because it's all part of the story. So lots of ways to verify the stories, and I thought, well, since we live on Substack, most of us, what a heck of a good place to look stuff up too. It was on Substack and find some articles and maybe sources and things that we can then publish. So that was the research sources to verify. And I got lucky with this one. I've got some other things that I might have a little harder time verifying, and I'll show you some of those in a bit. But this was easy. This one popped right up. There it was. And so confirmed what we had been told, confirmed the story my grandmother told us. And so we'll just need to add a little more information as to who his mother was and who actually received the plaque and things. So that's that particular artifact that I have. And so, as I mentioned, I know where it is right now. It's with one of my cousins, and I don't know how it's stored, and I'm going to have to do a little nagging and get pictures of the back of it too. So once we verify the story, then are there stories within the story? Because sometimes there's stories, and this might be if we find other information out other than what we were told. And so these are this is the story behind the story. So my grandfather, as I mentioned, fought for Britain in World War I and for Canada in World War II. And at some point, his medals and some other items were given to one of my younger cousins, and who was a boy. He got them, and so I'm in the middle. I'm not the youngest, I'm not the oldest. There were older boys, but this particular cousin spent quite a bit of time with my grandpa, which I think is probably why he got grandpa's medals when he died. And I knew where they were, and I don't recall, maybe I was upset. I'm not sure that I was. I don't really think that I was upset because he got them, but at any rate, several people in my family, either that or other people, were upset that he got them, not me. I don't know, but so on the far left are a set of World War One medals that are, these are in my possession. All these items are actually in my possession. That one of my aunts went out, or she brought me and gave them this. There was a friend of their family named William Twining, and he had no family. He was a friend of theirs. He was never married. He had no kids. And so they ended up with his stuff when he passed away. And he was older. He'd been the same age as my grandfather, probably. And so it was my aunt and her husband who knew him. I still have to find out that connection. And so my aunt gave me Bill's medals because they would be the same as the ones my grandfather had. Bill's name is engraved on them all. All three of them have Bill's name engraved on them, but I have this little box of medals and a presentation case and a little pin as well of Bill's World War One medals that my grandfather would have got too. So I thought, okay, so these are in our collection. And I think this is where it becomes really important that you tell the stories that of where things came from, because they're sitting in their little box on a shelf. And at some point, if somebody stumbles on them when I'm gone, they're going to go, who was this guy? Like, what relative was this? And he isn't. He was just a friend. And so that my aunt bought me those, or sorry, gave me those. And my father, who was obviously these weren't his family, he collected military stuff, tons of he collected medals, he collected everything, hat badges, flashes, and everything. So he went out and got me. My grandfather was in the Veterans Guard. So that's the middle picture. Grandfather was in the Veterans Guard of Canada. So my dad went out and got me the shoulder flash, the Veterans Guard of Canada. That's the stripe with Veterans Guard written on it. The hat badge, that's the larger item at the bottom. And the two medals that my grandfather would have got from World War II, and his collar dogs, they're called. That's the smaller Veterans Guard symbols. And buttons the little things that look like brass tacks in the picture are actually buttons that would have been on his jacket, on his uniform jacket. So these things are in my collection. And so at that point, I would have described them. I've now figured out Grandpa didn't earn one of those medals that Bill earned in World War One because he wasn't in the rifle section, which is the one that is in that picture of the three medals is on the far right. So fast forward to 2019, and my dear cousin who was in possession of Grandpa's, and I nagged him a lot. I wanted a picture of them. I didn't care that I had the medals themselves. I just wanted a picture to add to my history. Lo and behold, Rich passes away in 2019, and after his service, we're gathered at a family home, and his daughter comes up to me and says, "I want to show you something." And she said, "I want you to have these because I know they're really important to you." And so on the far right are my grandfather's actual medals, his hat, and one of his collar dogs. So that's the story behind the story. So the first story is those are my grandfather's, his medals from World War I and World War II are the four medals hanging there. And that's his hat from the Second World War, from one of his Veterans Guards hats. That's one of his poppies that he would have worn and on Remembrance Day in Canada, and a collar dog that he would have had too. So that's what I mean by story within the stories, because it speaks to a whole bunch of things, like people, my aunt and my dad wanting to make sure that I had these things that I wanted, and then the gifting. I was very honored that my niece gifted me his actual medals that Rich had, and so that there's usually stories inside the stories that are about where these things came from and the provenance of them. So the provenance for Grandpa's medals are they came from my grandfather, gave them to my cousin Richard, and now they're in my possession. So that's when I would be describing them. And I'll separate those out. The reason it's such a horrible picture, obviously they're falling out of, you can see the loose pin. This wasn't a professional framing job. I need to take them in and get them properly framed and do the proper photographs at some point. But I thought, well, I just take a snapshot of it just to talk about stories within the story. And so that's one of what I mean about those stories within the stories. And there could be many others connected with artifacts of how you came into your possession. We have another family artifact that It's a rifle, a pin of a rifle, and we thought it was connected with Daniel, but I don't think it was. So it's and we don't know. Nobody's quite sure where it is now. But I've been Googling some of it, and I don't have a picture to show you. But doing the research on it, it was probably what they called a sweetheart pin. And so it most likely would have had a piece on it with some jewels on it, and it could have been Benjamin's or Daniel's. We don't know. But now that we can't find it anyway, and I'm gonna have to try and the find some pictures of the pin going by my memory of what it looks like. So that one will be far down the list unless somebody uncovers where that rifle pin has got to. So that's the telling the story within the story. And then this part, this was how do you how will you share the information with people? And so this is a couple things. I'm a scrapbooker, so I make pages for albums. They're digital. I'm not doing paper scrapbooking anymore. But on the left is a page for my grandfather. Um, he was in the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve in World War One, and that's him as a nice young man. And those are all of his service certificates, which I actually have the originals of. We have the original documents of his military records. So there's scans of them, and then tiny pictures, which in retrospect, I need to make bigger, of the fronts and backs of his medals on the page about my grandfather. Um, Not sure if those were the front. I can't remember when I took the pictures of the medals, if they were the fronts of his medals or the backs of them. But that's one way to share the information with family, is to put it in somehow, connect all the pieces together of all those records. And of course, I would also have connected to that the actual documents so you could read them, the actual service record, so you could read the whole service record. But it does show. I highlighted the parts where he was wounded in France. He was lucky. Apparently, he didn't go to Gallipoli, so he got wounded in France, but um, and survived. The other page is one that I just sort of as another example of what to do with how to share these stories. That's my mom, and that picture we had in our family collection forever. And my family didn't grow up wealthy; they were farmers in rural Alberta, and I always wondered why was there a professional picture of my mom in the collection? So I had the picture, and then I had the medal you see on the side is Governor General of Canada's Academic Medal. And I knew she got that for having the highest marks in grade 9. Like I knew that's what the medal for, and it was all engraved, but I had never connected the two until one day. I think I told this before. One day I was browsing newspapers.com looking for something else and came across that newspaper article with that same picture in it, talking about my grandmother being awarded that medal. And then I added to that the little clip at the bottom is from the one of the Canada.ca websites telling about what the medal is for. And so that's a way to share all the information in one piece instead of separate things, to share the photos of there and tell the story at the same time. And I want to do something similar for Daniel Loudon and include all the information we have on him on that particular thing. More artifacts. So, and again on the verification. So on the upper left, this is what I mentioned when I was in the live, was a ship in the bottle. And so this is from World War II. My grandfather was a guard at a prisoner of war camp in Kananaskis country, which is a lot of mountains there. And the prisoners, here's the story. So it's a ship in the bottle. My mom's name is on it. My mom's name isn't Mary or something, it's Joyce. So it's a kind of not that usual of a name. So pretty sure it was made for her. So what the story was that in the POW camp, the prisoners made crafts because not many tried to escape because they were in the middle of literally nowhere. They were German troops. I had been told they were Rommel's troops, was part of the story that I'd been told, and that they made these crafts and did these things just to pass the time. And they played basketball and did sports too, but this was one of the things they did to pass the time because they weren't really plotting their escape in there. So I was trying to verify whether that story was true or not. And the first thing I did was I was at a family reunion in a place called Wainwright, Alberta, where my dad is from. And in the museum, there was a section dedicated to the World War II prisoner of war camp that was outside of Wainwright, Alberta. And lo and behold, the museum had in its possession ships in bottles. And so I went, okay, there's some confirmation. And so then I verified it with ChatGPT again today, and I got a whole list of other museums that will have the ship in the bottle and a description of the prisoners made this and loads of other kinds of crafts they had. And so that's the verification for my ship in the bottle. And Barbara's going to share in the resources that I did a little story for a show and tales for my friend Marty McNabb, and it's on YouTube, the clip of me talking about the ship in the bottle and a little more information there. But I've now confirmed that is in fact what that is. I'm working on the picture in the middle. That's two little picture frames. Glass, the concave glass unfortunately got broken at some point. I've been told that these also were made by prisoners and that they're made out of artillery shells. But I can't find any information yet on whether that's true or not. So I'm still looking up that one. They definitely have been in our family for a long time. They aren't something somebody picked up at a flea market or something. But I'm still a bit puzzled as to why they would have had artillery shells to do crafts with in Canada. Like that part is confusing me. So more information is needed to be done on that one. And then the other artifact that I don't know that I'll find much more information out about is the little wooden shoe. And the story behind the wooden shoe there is that um, my grandfather, when the war ended, the Veterans Guard were tasked with transporting the prisoners back to Germany to be released. And so I imagine they went by rail and then by ship. And he was in Holland at the end, after the war ended, he went to Holland. And then he went back to England and visited his family. He did go there, but I've been told that the wooden shoe is something he brought back for my grandmother from Holland when he was on that trip. So it's a wooden shoe. It's going to pretty hard to do much verification on it. So, but that's that. So that one will just have the story, and we'll just go with no verification on it. One more. So what are we going to do with the artifacts? Now, these are pictures. These aren't artifacts, but I just thought I'd give you a little idea of what the prisoner of war camps that I've been talking about for quite a bit of time looked like. So on the left, I believe this is a picture that's in one of the museums, not in our family collection, but that's kind of a shot of the prisoner of war camp and where it was. So it was a big clearing in the mountains. So the mountain's called Mount Baldy in the background. We can still go visit there. There's a little bit of stuff left in the prisoner of war camp. There's a guard tower and what they called the colonel's cabin, which was the colonel, obviously, where the colonel lived. So there is still a little bit there that we frequently go out there and visit, and I feel close to my grandpa when I go out there to visit it. So, and it's beautiful. Like if you ever want to take a trip, come out and go to the mountains from Calgary because it's just gorgeous. And then the other picture is a family photo. And again, it's my grandfather sitting on a rock I'm presuming it's Great Barrier Lake, that's also in Kananaskis country that would have been near the prisoner of war camp. And he is in a casual uniform. So what are we going to do with all this stuff? And we talk about preserving the stuff in a previous Kathy's Corner, and Barbara will share that link to that one, I'm sure. But you want to add all the information. First of all, add all the information to it. If possible, it's right on the art, like the medals, I can put the information right on the back of the frame when I get them framed. If it's not possible, you need some way to put a little note or something so that people know where the information came from. The ship in the bottle, I was taking a picture of myself with it for the YouTube video for Marty, so she had a screenshot for it. And I got my son to take it, and he goes, what's the, why are we doing this, Mom? What's the deal? What's the deal here? He probably said. And I said, well, I explained it to him, and he goes, I didn't know that. I never knew what that was. And I went, a little light bulb went off in my head. And I went, yeah, that's what I'm here for now. That's what I need to do. So tell the stories behind the artifact. Preserving them depends a lot on what they are. you want to keep it out of sunlight. The ship in the bottle, I still have handy. Um, and I keep it on a bookshelf, but it's pretty sturdy because I think this is a what used to be a Sloan's liniment bottle. I'm pretty sure that's what it was built in because they made them in whatever they had around. And so it's a pretty hefty, it would take a lot to break that, but it's not stored in sunlight. It's stored in a bookcase and safely stored in the bookcase. So preserving them, again, it depends on what it is. The metals I will probably reframe in museum glass and again not hang them where the sun's going to beat in on them to keep them in that, but to frame them so because you could put them and store them carefully away in archival boxes and stash them in a cupboard, but I think that prevents the story from being told when somebody walks over and goes, "What is that?" So I like that idea. Add the information to it. If you're to the point where there's nobody to pass things on to or nobody wants anything, donate them. My cousin checked one time and told them we have a bunch more pictures. We have a lot of pictures of that POW camp that my grandfather took because he had a camera then. And the Canadian Military Museum in Ottawa and the Glenbow Archives here in Calgary will take them, period. Like, not even, oh, well, we'll pick through them. It's like anything like that, they'll take them. So sometimes you just need to track down the right location to give the things back to give them back to. So, okay, that's my stories, and I'm sticking to it. Anybody have stories they want to share? Questions? I
Go ahead,
talked a lot.
Cynthia.
I have a lot of questions, but the shoe, the little wooden shoe, is it, it's kind of hard to tell in the picture. Is it, because it looks kind of flat, is it finished, or
Yes.
is it meant to be used as something else just in the
Hang
shape
on,
of
I'll
the shoe?
grab it.
Okay.
I can grab it. There it is. So
Oh, okay, okay.
and the back, absolutely nothing on the back. It looks like it's lacquered.
Yeah.
There is a little, oh, you're not going to see that. I got to get my background blur off. Stand by. I could stop my screen share too, and then we could have a full screen. How about that? There.
There we go.
Okay, just let me take the blur off my background. There. And see there. I don't know if we're going to get,
Okay.
but there
Pull it back
is
a
a
little
little
bit.
design on it, and there's some
Yeah.
other little markings carved on the side. The shallowness of it, like it's really quite shallow. So I don't know that anybody could wear it, and there is only one.
Mm-hmm.
So as I say, this is going to be a tough one to figure out if that's the true story behind it. But it's what's one of the things too is that um, it's been in the club forever. Bill, an answer to your question was it is quite close to Banff National Park. It's on your way to Banff National Park, you take the highway, turn off Highway 40 into Kananaskis country, and it's right there. So it definitely is near Banff National Park. So go ahead, Cynthia. You had more questions.
That's okay. That was my main question, but it was really interesting to learn about the prisoner of war camp. I will have to look that up on a map later because I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, I was quite surprised. Oh, that's a good suggestion, Bill, to photograph the shoe with the light background instead of the dark blue. I do have to do that again. Yeah, I guess when I was old enough to be told the stories and started looking into it, I was quite surprised that we had prisoners of war in Canada. I should know how many camps there were, but there were quite a few. And they initially started off at one point, they were like alien alien enemies. They had Italians and civilians, Italians and Ukrainians for some reason, in them originally as work camps. And then they converted them into the POW camps. And there were some in the Maritimes as well in Canada too. And I don't know
I
about in the US, but
I did not. You first time you asked, suggested I look it up, and sure enough, there is at least Wikipedia that says there's a list of quite a number of them, scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. I had no idea.
in the
Wow.
US too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is US only, and then you can sort
Yeah.
it by state. Yeah, quite a few even right here in California.
Yep.
And I don't think that's including the American internment camps.
Internment camps, yeah.
That's not including US Americans include in internment camps. Wow.
Kathy, wasn't the other one at Suffield?
I think there was one at Southfield
Yeah,
too, one at
yeah.
Wainwright, which I didn't know there until I was in the Wainwright Museum and saw
Oh,
all the like I started looking at the pictures and I'm sort of like when I first looked, I'm like, why do they have pictures from because this isn't my grandpa on this side of this is my dad's side of the family. Grandpa that was in the Veterans Guard was on mom's side of the, why is there stuff on the Kananaskis camp in Wainwright? Because they're not close. Wainwright's like
oh,
five and a
yeah,
half hours north of here.
yeah.
And then I realized that there was a camp at Wainwright too, and also later on a military base in Wainwright. But I think there was one at Suffield too.
Wow. While you were describing, as soon as you showed that picture of the POW camp, I uh, I was reminded of a site where you can upload any photo free to look up what the location is of any kind of, historic place. I just found an old travel. It's very cool for those old travel photos of parents that, you weren't along for, and a photo that I thought was maybe, I don't know, Jordan. Nope, it was Grenada in Spain.
Oh,
Grenada. Who knew?
and you're going to tell us the name of that site?
Oh yes, I thought I might. It's called Picarta, and I will include a link in the Picarta, like Carta, but PI. And it just gives you the GPS locations, which is especially helpful.
Yeah.
Here you go.
And
I'll paste it
I'm
in there
only
now,
using
and it'll be in the notes.
Chat GPT. I'm not advocating for it, or I don't make any money off recommending it. It's just because I was asking it so many questions as I worked on the project we're going to talk about on Sunday on Project Kin Live. But I have been using chat, and I kept running out of my free questions of the day. So I thought, okay, I'll just pay them. So I'm now using them since I paid for it. So that's just the only reason why I'm talking. There's lots of other sites where you can look stuff, you can use to search that. But I just thought I got a way better list of military record sites from Chat GPT than I did from Google search. But I also don't know if I get mixed up now between a Google search and they're using their Gemini AI too. So
Well, then there's using Lens, Google Lens, which is breathtakingly good.
yeah,
Breathtakingly good. Which reminds me, you had some interesting photos shared by our very own Anne
I did.
Larkham, who was
Yes.
unable to join us today.
Hang on.
Do you have those to show?
Yeah, just 1 second. I just have to figure out where they are. Okay.
So
Zoom.
many of you know Anne Larkham as a longtime participant here since the Ponga days, and she was unable to join us today, but sent her regards and a few artifacts,
Yes.
one of
And so
which, go ahead.
Paul Chittick, who's on Substack and writes fascinating things about history. And I've just found out Paul actually has written several things about military artifacts too. And so Anne sent us a picture to Barbara and I to let us know she couldn't come today. And this was the picture. And so it's a pincushion with the Royal Fusiliers logo on it from Britain and say, think of me with best wishes. And she had this mystery photo as well. And if we look, my eye went right away to the collar dogs and the hat badge. That's the Royal Fusiliers as well. I don't know if I'm saying that word right. Fusiliers? I think I am. So Paul wrote about this pincushion that Anne has. And this whole article that Barbara will share the link to in the recordings as well. Paul has written about a whole bunch of um, heirlooms in this collection, and his article is called "Hidden Treasures: Preserving the Stories Behind Family Heirlooms." And so this is, and with it, the soldiers' photographs. So sweetheart pin cushions were popular amongst British soldiers during World War I, often made from materials found at the front, like cloth from their uniforms. They were then sent back to wives, sweethearts, or mothers as tokens of love, affection, and remembrance. Anne's pincushion is a stunning example, beautifully embroidered, I'm skimming, and displaying the insignia of the Royal Fusiliers. Its small yet significant detail tells us that the soldier who made it was part of this regiment, but it was also a gift for someone. Accompanying the pincushion is a photograph of a serving soldier of the Royal Fusiliers, a man who likely crafted the pincushion. For Anne, the most puzzling part is the identity of the soldier. We've been talking about that a lot. Pincushion tells the story. The photograph offers no clues as to who he was or how he's connected to Anne. And she still hasn't been able to solve that mystery. So we're going to have to keep working on that. But again, another perfect example of a military artifact. And Paul, in that article, has written about it so well. Like he's written such a good story.
Now there are so many different details where, like the Picarda I just shared, that AI is running so fast on so many of these tools. And now that we have these tools, people are leveraging them into, collected, specialized ways. I sure hope that we're able to find the home for these kinds of things by bringing it up again and again and again, while reinforcing these terrific work that have been done by others. Honestly, I saw Anne's post to you and me, and immediately, I didn't even read her email. I went straight to that object, and I was Google image searching it right away, and poof. I found Paul's article, and I was like, but we know Paul Chittix. What?
We know Paul Chittix.
That's chittixtree.com is his really substantial ongoing blog, and a delight to read. And it's a delight to have him such an active member of Substack, our genealogy community here on Substack. And Bill, it's lovely to welcome you. I see your chat here. It's welcome. It's a lovely to have you here as part of all of this. And so a quick reminder, all of our events are at projectkin.org/events. And now I routinely have a scheduled Substack Live every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is a rather inconvenient 10 p.m. for the UK and a rather inconvenient crack o' dawn for Australia, New Zealand. It's pretty decent for New Zealand. But I'm always happy to also, in addition to having my special guests from events speaking there, I am always happy to welcome people from, our little community here. You got something to tell me about? Come on down. And let's see if we can't work it in, because that's what we're doing on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's that all about?
Have stories to share before we're building suspense here.
Right.
Does anyone else have any stories to share of artifacts? Or they don't necessarily have to be military. I just thought I have a lot of military artifacts, and those are the ones, in some ways, are the easiest things to track down. I'll have to.
I don't have any military artifacts. It really makes me wonder who got those in our family. But I will add that oftentimes today anyway, in the dissolution or distribution of an ancestor's possessions when they pass, these days we share pictures because, we're not all living in the same town often. And we certainly are not. So we went through my mom's entire collection, which was substantial, one object at a time, to photograph them all. I now have this massive collection that's what I was doing. I was looking it up it's an album, and I couldn't find it under Lois, under what? It was under Mom. Not to her Lois, filed under Mom, to find the album of all of these objects. And then my sister created a catalog so we could have a discussion. And it really reminds me of how important it is to have, every object is a blog. It's a post.
Yeah.
And it has its that post should include its provenance and all the detail behind it, and then let a dialogue happen about the objects. And we don't do it that way because I don't know, we never did it that way. I've never thought of it that way. I use weare.xyz, the family history archive, and I'm very fond of it for a lot of reasons. And there is a whole section just for artifacts, but I've not really used it. I'm falling behind, you know?
Well, and I think there's a more, even almost more danger now because, we've got to the point where we're digitizing our collections and everything of photos. There's probably even more danger that we lose artifacts and the stories behind them because, like somebody will not necessarily, most people won't toss the box of photos, but at some point, and I go back to my son not knowing what that bottle shape in a bottle was. And you have to look really carefully. Like I stared at it forever when I was a kid. You hear the story, but um, that might have been something they went. It's more about because it's sitting on I have a shelf with a glass bookcase, and there's a bunch of stuff in there. Some of which is these old art things from Grandpa, and some of them are things people gave me last week. Well, maybe not that new, but they're just sort of a little shelf of treasures. And then now that I think about it, I need to document those. Because almost everything that is on that shelf has some kind of a story.
Yeah.
And just to show that thing sitting there isn't just a piece of like kitschy stuff that I gathered somewhere, that there is a significant story.
He probably,
Uh,
Kathy, oh, sorry. He probably thought that it was something he couldn't touch.
Probably, yes, because it's in that bookcase. Good
Right.
point. So,
speaking of objects that you find that you may or may not know what they are that belong to your ancestors, I'm reminded of a story that Laurie Olson White tells about a figurine, a porcelain figurine that is one of these collectibles of which there are a certain number of them and so on and so forth. And a little character holding balloons. And it didn't mean anything to her, but it meant the world to her mother. And she was able to find the original and give that back to her mother, which meant so much to her. And some of these objects really do have lots of copies of them. And having your own story, even if it's something like a medal, like a Purple Heart, of which the heart itself kind of looks the same, whether it was yours or somebody else's. You may not be able to find yours, but if you have your story about that medal, you can go get a replacement. Okay, so that made me uncool, but you could explain how yours is different than the original. Or worse, the brother has it.
yeah. Or in my case, I have a small collection now of medals that don't belong to anybody in our family, which again becomes important because if people need to get rid of things, possibly we can get rid of the medals that, particularly the ones my dad found that I don't even think they're engraved. So I don't know, like, there's not even a
Yeah,
chance.
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
The bottom line here is that it doesn't mean that we have to trace every single object ever anywhere and always hold on to it. That's what you call a hoarding mentality. But it's rather appreciating things for what they are and letting the tools that we have now, to particularly for genealogy and family history, letting those tools help us to appreciate and have respect in the value of the things that we have. Got a lot of, frankly, touristy junk that got mixed up with the good stuff. And separating the two is important.
But even some of that, like that touristy stuff, because somewhere here there's a really tacky looking glass sculpture of a boat, and it's kind of like a steamship or something. And written on it is Rigaud PQ, Rigaud PQ. Well, I lived in Rigaud PQ for 5 years. I was teaching at a federal government training institution, and I got that there. And we bought them, my friends and I, because they're hilarious. Because while the Rigaud is sort of south of the Ottawa River, where a big boat like that might have gone, I don't think I'd have to Google that. I don't think big boats like that ever went near the little town of Rigo because the river there was maybe, 10 feet wide. I don't know how deep it was, but it was always, but it's there and it's the story. And it connects me to all the friends I have that I worked with during those 5 years.
Which reminds me to the whole larger picture about the objects that we carry, the objects that we have, right? And Marty McNinch, who
McNabb.
that McNabb that you introduced me to, and her ongoing series about telling tales in
Mm.
objects. You want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I'm just going to grab the link.
Well, yeah.
Quickly, quickly. There we go. Oh, that was easy. I could have made that up. So Marty does something called her the things we keep. And
There
her
we go.
company is called Show and Tales. And she does Zooms where people bring an artifact that has meaning to them, and we talk about why it has meaning. And Marty is in the not the decluttering, the minimalist community. And so she's for many years lived out of a motorhome. So she has to get she did do some downsizing, but she does a lot of sessions and they're just fascinating. They're wonderful to participate in. I love that, Bill. Thank you. So she's showandtales.com. And she came on Kathy's Corner one time to talk about,
Yes,
I
she
think we
did.
were talking about stories. And that's what she's all about, is telling the stories behind the objects. And it's the sessions I've participated in with her have just been phenomenal. It's just because everybody shares their stories and things. So um,
It's also such a reminder of how the objects, it's like they carry. That's where I was confused. They carry the stories. They have this payload of
mhm.
the stories, and sometimes you need a decoder ring to be able to open them up and appreciate and respect them. So I want to thank you, Kathy, for really helping us crack the seal and break into these objects and remind us that we all have them in our families. And they are kind of waiting to open up the rest of those stories. And for those of us who are also exploring our family history, the stories about why people are important, what they did, what they accomplished, is sometimes right there inside those objects. So I'm looking forward again. These are our regular Project Kin events where all of you are always welcome to participate as active participants as you have. But then we also host once a week on Sundays this Substack Live session, which is run using Substack's Live feature, which is fun and creates its own interaction with chat. So I had Kathy last week giving a little preview of what we were doing this week. And as a special occasion, we have Kathy joining us again. So, Kathy, what are you going to be talking about this coming Sunday?
This coming Sunday, I'm going to be talking about something new. Barbara is my Substack guru, and I've discovered. I
I'm
have
your
to say,
pig.
I did not discover Substack on my own. I discovered it when Barbara was looking for somewhere for Project Kin to live, and gradually, and then that's where Project and Kathy's Corner has lived. And I'm, as you know, trying to retire for years now. I keep saying I'm retiring, but I have taken the big step of redesigning my website to reflect that I no longer do professional photo managing for other people, and shrunk it right down to hardly anything. And I'll probably get rid of it in a year coming soon. But I've decided to move my blogging and storytelling to Substack. And so hopefully by Sunday, fingers crossed, we're going to talk about the launch of Kathy's coaching on Substack.
Yay.
So graciously, I
Uh,
think Barbara has no events next week because of the holiday, so I think that may be part of it. But we're going to do a little show you. Hopefully, I'm still going to get a few things done. Show you my new Substack, and it'll be Kathy's coaching. And for those of you who could recommend it, I would really like that. And pop in, and I'll talk a little bit more about what's going to be behind that
you bet.
publication.
You bet. And in all seriousness, I do like having a way to have a, essentially an open soapbox to invite people in to talk about what they're doing and where they're going, because this is a community. I really feel strongly about that. And this is a way that we can use those to connect and see each other and get to know each other, worry if you're gone for a few days and want to know what's going on. We may not have actually ever met, but that's kind of irrelevant anymore. I'd be nice to give you a hug every now and then, but thank you all so much. So we look forward. Hope you feel better, Cynthia, and it's good to see you back. As all stay well, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. And Bill, I will follow up. Thank you again. Talk to you soon.